The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Get the OSG Sports app today.
What makes college football special? It's the rivalries and trophy games, from the brass lantern to the oil can. It's college football's rivalries and trophy games. Here's your host, John Nelson and John Wilkerson.
Tommy Palmer, thanks. John Wilkerson here. John Nelson will join us a little later. This weekend, it's the 155th meeting between Lafayette and Lehigh at Goodman Stadium in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Later in the show, Matt Markus from the Lehigh broadcast team and Mike Joseph from the Lafayette Sports Network will join John Nelson to talk about that great rivalry. And later, Cory McCartney from Fansided.com joins me to talk about a pair of West Coast rivalries. And let's begin out west, where for the 89th time, UCLA and USC will meet at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum in what they call the nation's most famous crosstown rivalry. Well, the winner gets to ring and paint the victory bell. This is for LA bragging rights, and it's a big deal. Let's hear from UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson and USC head coach Clay Helton.
You come to a school like this to playing games like this, you can definitely feel that in the atmosphere, not only in practice but around school and stuff like that. And, you know, every corner you turn and every classroom you walk in, you see BDSC and stuff like that now. So, you know, like I said, the juices are flowing at practice, and everybody's excited. So I'm definitely excited to play on Saturday.
It's always been an honor to be a part of this rivalry because I think it's one of the more special and unique rivalries that are out there in college football. You got two first-class academic universities that actually live together in the same city, and we've grown up together. We live together, and I think that's what makes it unique. This UCLA team, I love what Chip has done with them in the second half of the season. I think they've really improved. If you look at what they did at Stanford, Arizona State, and Colorado, to be able to win by 2-3 scores in those games, I thought it was ultra impressive.
Up in the Bay Area, it's the big game between Cal and Stanford. It's the 122nd time the Bears and the Cardinal have met on the football field, so it's the longest rivalry out west. Of the 121 games that have been played between Cal and Stanford, the most famous, of course, is that crazy ending in 1982. And once again, let's hear that famous call from the voice of the Cal Bears, Joe Starkey.
Ball comes loose and the Bears have to get out of bounds. Rodgers along the sideline, another one. They're still in deep trouble at midfield. They tried to do a couple of... The ball is still loose as they get it to Rodgers. They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's going into the end of the Bears. The Bears have won. The Bears have won. Oh, my God. The most amazing, sensational, dramatic, heart-rending, exciting, thrilling finish in the history of college football.
And joining me to talk about these West Coast rivalries is an old friend at a new place, Cory McCartney from Fansided.com. He's a college football writer. Cory, it's always great to catch up, and welcome back to the College Football Rivalries and Trophy Games podcast.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing great. All right, some significant rivalries out west. And, of course, UCLA, USC meet in the Coliseum on Saturday. And how important is it for this rivalry between the two LA schools to matter in the college football playoff or in the bowl picture? Right now, it doesn't. It matters. It's just, it's kind of been tamped down a little bit because both teams have become mediocre. But how important is it to West Coast football that rivalry has some kind of national profile?
Yeah, I mean, it's really it, right? I mean, you can think about, certainly Oregon, Stanford has had some big moments, but that's the one. I think you think about, the Coliseum or the Rose Bowl and just that red and blue together. I mean, that's Pac-12 football right there. And it's kind of like the, hey, aren't you jealous bowl? I mean, when you think about the views out there, I mean, the weather, I mean, what else do you have to get up for USC and UCLA right now. I mean, the coaching situation's a mess. I mean, it kind of, it feels this is not the hot commodity Chip Kelly that we had just a few short years ago. Clay Helton is in a bad way. It just doesn't feel like it's important right now, but it needs to be, and I think it needs to be for that conference. You and I have talked before about the problems with their network and just all the bad stuff that's happened to the Pac-12 these last few years. They need this game to be important and to have it be one that people circle, because it is one of the more storied rivalries. I mean, think about Gary Beeman and O.J. Simpson, and those two going at it one year, and the following year O.J. comes back and wins the Heisman, and this rivalry has mattered for a long time and needs to get back there, I think, without question, for this conference.
And the Los Angeles market at a time was really open for both programs to assert itself. Obviously, because of the Rams and the Raiders left, and Southern Cal kind of was that football program in L.A., and UCLA was kind of the second, the younger brother, I guess, in that mix. And now that pro football has returned with the Rams coming back and the Chargers, and it kind of coincides with the mediocrity of both programs, you got to think that if college football, which USC was that team, and LA kind of became a college football town for a while, and I think it still is, but both these programs need to do their part to keep that focus, to keep college football in the front pages in the LA area, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can certainly, run that through line of everything that happened in the end of the Carroll era, with the wins vacated, Reggie Bush's Heisman vacated. I mean, if that stuff doesn't happen, does USC ever fall from that? Even if Carroll leaves, if that stuff doesn't happen and they don't vacate the wins and, they don't have this kind of, specter hanging over them, and obviously the AD issues there, I think that was really the beginning of what we've seen with LA football from a collegiate level, because, you're right. I mean, UCLA had an opportunity too, and Mora didn't work, and now the era of Chip Kelly just hasn't been, it just hasn't clicked at this point. So, LA college football is, it has a swagger to it, and it just hasn't been there. I don't think since we've seen everything kind of unfold there at the end with Pete Carroll's time and just those storied teams that he put together.
So obviously, as you said earlier, the interest is kind of waning on this rivalry. It'll still be a packed crowd, I'm sure, at the Coliseum, because it's UCLA USC. It's just not going to be the national focus that it's been in the past. How do you see this game playing out?
I think USC is going to win big. I mean, you think about them; they're 11th in passing in the country. UCLA is 123rd against pass. Keaton Slovis, the Trojans quarterback, 12th in the nation in passer rating, a 162.9. There's 11 TDs in November. That's the most of any Power 5 quarterback. So I think this guy is finding his footing. And when you look at what's the biggest problem for UCLA, I think the Trojans are going to absolutely take advantage. They've won 16 of 21. They've won in this rivalry. I think they're going to win another one.
Yeah, Keaton Slovis wasn't really expected to contribute much this year, and because of the injury issues, he's gotten his opportunity, and man, is he taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that there. I mean, 11 TDs this month. I mean, the guy from Troy is the only one who has more this month than he does, and he's just been so steady, and I think that's, they needed something to get excited about on this team, and I think it sets them up nicely. I mean, they're averaging just under 320 passing yards a game, so I think they're in a position. They obviously, this is a team that beat Utah. They had that narrow loss to Notre Dame, and those were kind of big moments for them. But look, 6-2 in the conference, and get a big win against UCLA here, and I think it sets them up for a nice little finish.
We're talking to Cory McCartney from Fansided.com. And we're talking the West Coast. We've talked UCLA, USC. Now let's move up to Northern California for the big game between Cal and Stanford. And both teams are having tough years. Cal probably, I thought, was going to be a little better than the 5-5 record they've got now. Stanford's had a tough year. So I mean, you think about this rivalry in the Bay Area and where these two schools are. Obviously, the '82 game is the one everybody remembers, the Kevin Moen running through the Stanford band. I guess that's the signature moment of this rivalry.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, you can make the case that this is basically the West Coast version of Virginia Tech, right? I mean, the Cardinals won 9 in a row in this one. And, it's both teams are nowhere near, what we would have thought, I think, when the season opened. I mean, especially Cal getting that early win over Washington. I mean, you felt like they were going to be something completely different. They've got a ton of injury issues. Stanford's had their own. I mean, we saw David Mills come out of nowhere last week to throw for a program record 540 yards. But this is certainly not the season either one of them would have expected. But things have weighed in Stanford's favor for a long time now, and I'm kind of getting the feeling on Saturday it's going to happen again.
So you like the Cardinal in this one?
I do. I mean, look, Stanford. They have a 2-game season ahead of them. They have to beat Cal and they have to beat Notre Dame in order to get bowl eligible. I don't know if the second thing there is going to happen, but look. Cal doesn't know if Chase Barber is going to play. They don't know if Christopher Brown Jr., the running back, is going to be available. They didn't practice earlier this week. Cal has not gotten anything going since that 4-0 start. That obviously included that win over Washington. I just think Stanford's going to find a way. I mean, I think of any team, when you look at Stanford and you say they just have the ability to kind of go back to, okay, let's just go back to basics. And what do? We just, we have the intermediate passing routes and we load up and try to run the football. And they haven't done that effectively this year. And I think when you think about, Evan Weaver, certainly the linebacker from Cal, who, I had on my All-American ballots that I filled out this week, they do some things really well, especially against the rush. But I think that Stanford passing game, to me, that's just ultimately going to be the deciding factor here. Okay,
Cory, where can we see your work?
You can find stuff for me at Fansided. You head over to the college football section there. You can always find stuff from me on my Twitter account as well at Cory J. McCartney.
Cory McCartney from Fansided.com and an old friend of the show. Thanks for joining us, and need to have you back more often.
All right, John. Appreciate it.
When we come back, it's Lafayette Lehigh. Matt Markus from the Lehigh Football Network will join us, as will Mike Joseph, the voice of the Lafayette Leopards. They both join John Nelson when we come back.
Want tickets to the big game? Go to SeatGiant.com. Use the code SDH at checkout. It helps you and it helps us. That's SeatGiant.com.
Welcome back to the USC and CFB's Trophy Games and Rivalries, and it is time to catch up with the master of everything Lehigh football, Matt Markus. Let's say during any normal day, you're doing about 98 different things, right?
Yeah, it could be a little bit of everything. Pre-game, halftime, post-game, sidelines. I'll drive the bus, have to as well.
Choice D, all of the above. And the reason that we're catching up with you this go-round is because of a game with two teams, one of which you're intimately familiar, and two teams that really do not like each other, Lafayette and Lehigh this week. It's another go-round of this one.
Yeah, the 155th matchup between these two teams, college football's most played rivalry. The beauty of it is they're both located in the same general area, so I'm intimately familiar with the one, but I'm pretty good with the other as well.
So how is it, I guess the depth is what I'm looking for here. What is this rivalry like? Because I know that here in our footprint here in the Southeast, a lot of folks have FBS and FCS rivalries that they're attached to, and the reason that we started doing this show was to kind of educate everybody on what is going on around the country in and of itself. What is this rivalry like for someone who's never seen it?
It's something that you really can't describe. These two schools do not like each other at all. We're located here in the Lehigh Valley, and they're separated by about 15 miles. There's not much between the two. Lafayette is in Easton, PA, and Lehigh is in Bethlehem. And for a while, there was just farmland in between. But these two teams have always been at each other's throats. Right now they're in the Patriot League. They've been so for, 30-some years. But because they've been so close, since they started playing football, they would play twice a year for a little while. Any sport, it's one of those prototypical rivalries where you say, you throw away all the records. Well, when it doesn't matter, we've had these two teams, 2 wins, 3 wins. Neither team's having a great season, although both can technically win or share the league championship this year. But the presidents are tweeting at each other. There's signs. People make posters and write on bed sheets and hang out the windows of both the campuses. Everybody really gets excited about this week.
What's the best sign that you've seen so far?
You know what? I saw it. Honestly, usually it involves social media and MySpace. So-and-so still uses MySpace, stuff like that. Although, one of my favorites I'd love to see on a bed sheet someday is something that I coined a little while ago that said Lafayette is French for last place. Although this year it doesn't really work.
All right. So when you became a part of this rivalry from doing everything that you do with Lehigh football, what was your first exposure to it? Could be behind the mic, could be just socially. What was your first exposure to this rivalry where you sat there and went, "Holy crap"?
Absolutely. It was 2005. My radio station started with Lehigh, covering Lehigh in the 04 season. And I wasn't involved too much. But 2005, halfway through the year, I became the sideline reporter. And Lehigh was going for a championship. And they had the lead late. It was at home. It was in Bethlehem. As a matter of fact, somebody from the league was in our radio booth talking about where Lehigh could go for the FCS playoffs. And Lafayette came down the field. It was a close game. And they were lining up for a field goal to tie the game late. It was 4th down, and it was not a very easy field goal. Time was called, as it normally is, and Frank Tavani was the head coach of Lafayette. He changed the plan, put the offense back out there, and they threw a bomb that was caught for a touchdown and the winning score. And we're talking, it was the last play of the game. It was going to be a tie game if they kicked the field goal. Lehigh wins the championship. If they don't, make that, or if they're not successful on 4th down. And my post-game interview changed just like that, because in one moment I'm getting ready to win a championship and talk to the winning coach, and now I have to talk about the heartbreak immediately following. That was my first game on the sidelines, and I'll never forget that.
So looking at this season, you kind of went into where both teams are, but when it comes to Lehigh specifically, what has this season been like, and who should be in the spot shadow for those who are going to be catching this game for the first time from your perspective?
Well, this year was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Their longtime head coach, Andy Cohen, resigned after last year with some health issues. So they bring in a new coach who had been with the program 15 years prior, give or take. But they graduated the best running back that the school ever saw. They graduated an awful lot. It was not supposed to be a very good season to begin with, and we kind of got a little bit of fool's gold in the middle because they lost 3 games early, but to a couple good, highly ranked teams. Then they won 4 games in a row. And halfway through the league season, they were in first place without a loss and said, hey, maybe this could be something. And they've lost the last 2. And they need some help. They could still share the title, but they would not get the automatic bid. So, halfway through the season, the perception of the season changed. But breaking in a new quarterback, a new running back, the line has been in and out with injuries. And as everybody knows, especially down south, everything's built around that line. And if you don't have one to protect the quarterback, it's not going to be very good. Tyler Monaco is a senior quarterback. He played a little bit sparingly last year, but really for the first time is the true quarterback. He missed the last game and a half or so with an injury. I'll find out more information this week and maybe even tomorrow, but word is that he should be back. Everything's obviously going to be revolving around him. The last game they were actually down to the 3rd-string quarterback, and they scored 6 points. So the offense hasn't been great this year, trying to work a number of guys back in. But if Tyler Monaco can play with the experience that he's gained throughout the season, that'll be a big factor for the Mountain Hawks.
What about on the defensive side of the ball, trying to keep Lafayette from scoring?
The Lehigh defense, the last 5-6 years, has been historically bad. And they've had some really good offenses, and the team was only so-so, even with a couple of championships. It is a complete reversal this year. They brought in a defensive coach. They brought in some good defensive minds. And this defense is what's keeping them in games and is technically keeping them somewhat alive for a championship. They have a linebacker, Keith Wetzel, is leading the country in tackles for a loss. I believe it's tackles for a loss, if not total tackles, but he's up there. Wetzel on one side, Pete Hafner is another, like junior linebacker. Those two are the studs in the middle of that defense. Some good guys on the defensive line as well. But the run defense had been gashed for about 3-4 years early on this season, and it still might be 1 or 2 in the league defensively. So Lafayette's offense has a lot of good young talent, probably the rookie of the year in their quarterback, Keegan Shoemaker. But stopping him and stopping the run is going to be key, and Wetzel and Hafner in the middle of that defense are going to be the key for the Mountain Hawks in that one too.
And Markus, pre, half, post, sideline, pretty much anything. Choice D, all the above for Lehigh, hanging out with us for another couple of minutes here on the OSG on CFB Trophy Games and Rivalries. As the resident tailgater on the show, I have to ask about this kind of experience when it comes to tailgate. For home games at Lehigh, what is the tailgating experience like? What should I look forward to when it comes to getting there incredibly early for kickoff on days like this when it's at Lehigh?
There is the Goodman campus that they have. It's not on campus. It's kind of like its own secondary athletic complex, which is bigger than most. Their athletic complex is probably bigger than Lafayette's campus, to be honest, and bigger than most campuses around the country. So there is a lot of room, a lot of tailgating. Unfortunately, most of that happens well away from our broadcast area. But it is unfortunate. There's 2 different areas, but I know the students, they come out for their morning cocktails, as they put it. The MOCOs is what the hashtag is. So they're there, but past Lehigh greats, the football partnership is great. To come back for most of the games, if not all of the games. But this place will be packed this weekend. It holds 16,000. Down year, it might not get to that much, but considering, again, both schools are separated by about 15 miles, the away stands are going to be packed, the home stands, the grassy area around it in the game, well, they're all going to have a good time beforehand. So there's going to be some great tailgates. And especially if it's cold, I have a feeling it's going to be pretty lit.
All right, so now it's time for the promo, and this is how we end every single segment. For those that want to catch up with this game this week, want to catch up with everything Lehigh, where odds are you will be on the air doing something when it comes to Lehigh athletics. How do folks listen? How do they keep track, especially starting with this game this weekend?
Absolutely. All things Lehigh, they want to go to LehighSports.com. You go right to the schedule page for the Lehigh football page as well, and you could listen live. You can watch live. This game is always televised and usually picked up nationally by a couple different outlets. But LehighSports.com would have all of the links, including my station, which is a Fox affiliate, but everything right there, LehighSports.com.
And at Markus LV on the Twitters. Matt, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for giving us the education when it comes to one of the best rivalries, bar none, here in the United States when it comes to college football. Thanks for being a part of the OSG on CFB.
Yeah, my pleasure. Enjoy.
All right, when we come back, we'll have more Trophy Games and Rivalries here on the OSG Sports Network. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Rock at the What's Up Falcons podcast, and I'm joined with my boys. My boys in the house. Where you at?
Yeah. What up?
LG, and we have Q, and we have Hoop in the house.
Q's here, the most beloved guy in all of sports entertainment.
Indeed. Hey, y'all, we want to thank everyone for listening to us, and if you want to listen to some great Falcons information, check us out on the What's Up Falcons podcast. Right, fellas?
Right. Sure. Hey, we here every week, baby.
We keeping it real, so So check us out there on Twitter. Holla. Peace.
Subscribe to the What's Up Falcons podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Listen to the What's Up Falcons podcast at whatsupfalcons.com.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football. Now back to college football's rivalries and trophy games.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB. It's Trophy Games and Rivalries. And since we caught up with Lehigh in the previous segment with Matt Markus, in the interest of equal time to catch up with Mike Joseph, the voice of Lafayette. Mike, welcome to Trophy Games and Rivalries here on OSG Sports.
Great to have you. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, so in talking to Matt in the previous segment, and for those that have a cursory knowledge of college football, these two schools, put it plainly, do not like each other.
I would say that's pretty accurate. They're only less than 20 miles apart. Obviously, it's the most played rivalry in college football. I've been lucky to be a player in this, a coach, and now a broadcaster for the last 10 years. So to put it plainly, yes, there's a lot of bad blood.
Do you remember your first moment in this rivalry where it hits you, where you had your holy crap moment? This really is a rivalry of these two schools not liking each other.
Well, I mean, the biggest one really wasn't when I played, or it was more or less when I was coaching. Back 95, which is 25 years ago almost. We had an overtime game in the dark. And they had to actually play the overtime, the second overtime, at the scoreboard end because there were no lights at Goodman Stadium. So we actually had to get as much light as we could. So they actually played the second overtime down next to the scoreboard because the scoreboard was lit up. And they ended up catching a pass at the end and beating us by a point. And then everybody just kind of stormed the field. And there were, a lot of pushing and shoving and stuff like that. I mean, obviously that's down the road after I had gotten involved with it in 1984 as a player. But, you get different feel for the game in every aspect. I always talk about the game as being somewhat of a five senses game. You see it, and then, you hear the sounds, you smell it, and then, you finally get to it, and obviously everybody in the parking lot's tasting it. So it's a five senses game for me.
And when you look at the game this season, what are some of the things that stand out to you? For I guess in the game preview section of this particular interview, what stands out in this particular go-round?
Well, both teams are struggling in some aspects, and a lot of those aspects really concern consistency. The out-of-league schedule for all Patriot League teams has been extremely tough. Lehigh started their season 0-3 and then went on had a couple wins. Lafayette started 0-7. But the out-of-league schedule is very tough, so you kind of monitor that. You try to feel who's playing, well enough to win games, but just might be outmatched physically or just, athletically. So the big thing this weekend is going to be who's going to be able to run the football, number one. Lehigh, on their third quarterback, is going to have to run the football. Lafayette, a freshman quarterback, they've established a run pretty well this year. They're rushing for about 115 yards a game. Lehigh only about 72 yards a game. So when you look at the disparity sometimes in statistics, there aren't a lot. But the one thing that sticks out to me is I believe Lafayette runs the ball a little bit better. And they're somewhat two-dimensional, where I believe if Lafayette can do a good job stopping the run versus Lehigh, they can make them one-dimensional, and in a game like this, you can't be that way.
So as you're putting your board together, and I know that we all put our boards together differently, and I know that your highlight colors are probably a little different when it comes to certain individuals. Who has the brightest highlights? Who's in your spot shadow for keys for Lafayette to win? It would be, player A, player B, player C.
Yeah, the impact players, at least we'll start on the Lafayette side. The impact players are really one on each side. I mean, offensively, it's the quarterback. It's the freshman quarterback, Keegan Shoemaker. He's been phenomenal. He's been player of the week, not only rookie of the week in the PL, but he's been player of the week 4 times. He's an exceptional athlete. He comes from down in Prosper, Texas. He can do it with his legs. He can do it with his arm. But then he makes those freshman mistakes. He's put a lot of those behind him. He doesn't make the same mistake twice, but he athletically can get outside the pocket, extend plays. He can throw the ball from the pocket. Again, he is the X factor offensively for Lafayette. And on defense, it's Malik Ham. Malik Ham is probably one of 2 of the best pass rushers in the league. He's a difference maker. Comes into the game with, I think, 6 sacks. He had 9 last year. Got off to a slow start this year, got healthy, has had all 6 of these sacks in the Patriot League games, in the last 5 Patriot League games. So on each side for Lafayette, there's one player there, Malik Ham, Keegan Shoemaker. On the other side, I believe it's going to be Porter Real, the wide receiver for Lehigh. He's just electric. He can take the top off of defense. He can return a punt for a touchdown. He does so many things for them. I believe him and Bibbins, the other wide receiver, are terrific. And then on defense for Lehigh, Wetzel's been fantastic. I mean, he's just a great player. Keith Wetzel comes into the game, Buck Buchanan Award watch list, leads the FCS in solo tackles this year. He's a guy that you have to find. You've got to get a body on him. You can't allow him to run sideline to sideline and make plays. For each team, those would be my spotlight players.
Has the rivalry changed much? Has it become more heated over the time that you've had all of your different incarnations of being involved in it? Has the rivalry changed a whole lot, or has it pretty much been the same when it comes to the emotion that's attached to it?
When I first started, to look at this in the 80s, it was I thought a lot more heated from a standpoint of school versus school. I mean, you used to be able to, rush the field, tear the goalposts down. They were wooden goalposts. And, prior to the game, post game, you could run on the field, tear the goalposts down. I had I was lucky enough to play in the last game at Taylor Stadium, which was 1987, which was about 17 below zero.
Wow.
And actually people were tearing the stadium apart in the fourth quarter. They were taking seats out. They were taking signs. They were taking placards. They were, the toilets. I mean, every part of the stadium was coming apart in the fourth quarter because it was the last game going to be played there at Taylor Stadium. And then obviously Lehigh moved to Goodman campus in 1988. So I think from a standpoint of school alumni, I don't think it ever dies. But both schools have kind of done things to kind of curtail the extracurricular activities along the line. But, like I said, when it comes to Lafayette and Lehigh, there's a lot of bad blood, and the rivalry's still there. The problem is lately we've had one school win a few in a row, and then another school win a few in a row. Like Lafayette has not won since the game at Yankee Stadium in 2014, which was game 150, which we had over 45,000 people for. When they said we couldn't fill Yankee Stadium, they sold 30,000 seats in the first week. That since that 2014, Lafayette has not won. So these seniors for Lafayette have a lot to prove, and they got to do it on the field.
Now let's go back to Yankee Stadium a little bit. How cool was that? Knowing, and kind of, I guess it was, you knew what Lafayette and Lehigh were capable of when it comes to showing support for this particular rivalry, but going there for 150, how special was that in the grand scheme of things? Because, I know the Pinstripe Bowl is there now, and there have been games in the past, but how special was it to have this rivalry in that cathedral?
Well, you can't put words to it. It was something that was hatched between the two athletic directors is, what if we get a chance to play here in basically the cathedral of sports? And, at first I think they were a little, taken back as to, can we fill this stadium? Can we do what we think we can? And when you get more people than, Notre Dame got for the Pinstripe Bowl there against Rutgers, I believe years before, and teams have tried to do it just recently. The Ivy League tried to fill it. Holy Cross and Fordham tried to fill it after we were done, and unsuccessfully. So It was just a ridiculous atmosphere, parties everywhere, up and down, not only all over the country, but all over Manhattan, up and down Broadway, people taking the trains, taking boats. I mean, it was on something that you could never expect. You had to be there for it. I was lucky enough to be on the field for it, to do interviews, post and pregame. It was something we'll never forget, and even better when Lafayette won 27-7. But just to be on that field and to have that, I mean, Frank Tavani, one of the former coaches at Lafayette, you could just see the emotion in his face, and to win that game was just very, very special.
All right, so what kind of a game are you anticipating? Are you anticipating something in the 20s, or what's your gut tell you?
It's going to be a low-scoring game. I've been pretty on with these Lafayette teams and Lehigh teams. Both teams are struggling, I believe, offensively to find consistency. Last week, if you looked, Lehigh only put up 6 points versus a good Sacred Heart team. They're averaging 15.5 points a game. Lafayette's averaging 18 points a game. I see this game something 17-6, 17-10. The weather is supposed to be, up and down, a little bit of rain, a little bit of wind. So I don't see either one of these teams kind of blowing the other team out, but I do see is a low-scoring game, a defensive game, and then it comes down to turnovers. Both of these teams are at the bottom of the Patriot League when it comes to turnover margin. They're both -4, and when you're -4, that equates to 3 and 8 seasons. So these teams are struggling to put points on the board. I think it's going to be who doesn't make the mistake to lose this game, and then which defense obviously can stop the run and maybe cause a turnover.
All right, Mike, time for the promo for those that want to listen, not just this week to LSN, but however the games come across the board. They want to listen this week. They want to listen to your call. They want to listen to what's going on. How do folks do it?
Well, if you want to obviously listen to it, it's on the Lafayette Sports Network. It will be on the Patriot League Network. It will be on Masson. In the local Lehigh Valley, it's RCN. It'll also be on Service Electric. Gary Laubach is our play-by-play announcer. I do the color commentating. Gary's been doing these games for 30 years. This is my lucky to be 10th year in the booth with him. Again, coming from a player and a coach, and this you can't imagine what it's like. You're not even going to get a feel for what it's like even on TV. But to just be part of it, to enjoy it on television, to understand that these are true student athletes. These are kids that are looking for jobs after this game's over. These are kids that are, going to be out in the world, be the leaders of tomorrow. And that's what Lafayette and Lehigh preach. And, there's a lot of rivalry between these two teams, but there's a lot of love as well, because they represent the best of the best. And, to catch the game, even if you're going to tune it on the radio, or if you're lucky enough to be in a place where we can find these games all over the country, because there's Lafayette and Lehigh parties everywhere. Please tune in, check it out. The rivalry is amazing, and the records, you throw them out the window.
Mike Joseph, part of LSN, and beautiful. It's one of the great rivalries that's out there, getting ready for Lafayette and Lehigh. Mike, thanks for being a part of the OSG on CFB and Trophy Games and Rivalries. We will be keeping an eye on what's going on up there this weekend.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, the show continues. It's the OSG on CFB. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
John Wilkerson here. John Nelson hasn't gone anywhere. He's still with me. And
check.
Good stuff with Lehigh and Lafayette.
That was fun. And to be able to catch up with Matt and Mike, I always remember growing up, Dave Dials, when you and I were of a certain age, and Dave Dials would always be in charge of the college football scoreboard when ABC did college football. And I distinctly remember Dave Dials discussing Lehigh and Lafayette as a part of what he would do at this time of the season. So it was fun to be able to understand that you have two schools about a half hour apart that don't like each other, and that's kind of what the show's all about. It was a fun debrief with the two of them.
And that rivalry goes before the formation of college football. I mean, it's the 150th year college football. It's the 155th meeting between Lehigh and Lafayette.
And, when you're looking at those kinds of rivalries, I know this is what you were thinking of when we, put the show together. So when you have this kind of information that we get to share with folks on a weekly basis, for me, it's fun. And it's been part of the cool factor of doing this show. And the response from the schools has been fantastic when it comes to being able to share what's going on and let everybody know what's going on in the world of college football that they may not necessarily have known about. And honestly, I've gotten so much feedback from our Monon Bell segment from last week's show that it was really cool. And I actually went back and watched the end of that particular game to kind of see what we're missing. And it appears that the DePaul coach is going to be retiring as well. So college classmate of Gil Tyree. So that's your piece of trivia for the show.
Good stuff right there. Okay, we talked with Cory McCartney from Fansided.com about first of all the big game in the Bay Area between Cal and Stanford, and relived the 1982 ending. Joe Starkey's famous call, and that's kind of two mediocre Bay Area teams just trying to get bowl eligible.
Right, and right now it's a 3 according to Vegas as you and I are talking. So basically, Vegas thinks the same thing. It's a push.
And UCLA, USC at the Coliseum, the Battle of LA, who gets to ring the victory bell. And that's always one of my favorite rivalries, USC, UCLA. Of course, USC is a much stronger team right now, and they still have a shot at the Pac-12 West.
You look at the numbers as we're looking at them right now. USC is a 6-point favorite. Your money line's at -110. And actually, the line started double digits, but it has absolutely plummeted since. Started out at 13.5 and 14, down to a 6 right now.
So there's other rivalries in the FBS and the FCS, and one that's really big right now is the SMU Navy game at the Naval Academy this Saturday. They play for the Gans Trophy. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but both schools are in a 3-way tie in the American West. Memphis, SMU, and Navy all at 5-1 in conference. So this game is huge because the winner of this game is in the driver's seat for a West title in the American.
And as you and I are talking, Navy is listed as a 4-point favorite. The line hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. Money line started at 110, and that's pretty much where it's parked. So this one's been a pretty stagnant -4 for Navy, and the money line around 110 to 115.
And of course, the prize is the Gans Trophy. This is in honor of Frank Gans, who was a special teams coach guru in the NFL. In fact, for a while, he was the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, but he played at Navy and he coached at SMU. And a few years back, they made a traveling trophy to honor Frank Gans and his contributions to both schools. But you and I remember him as a special teams guru in the NFL way back in the day.
And you remember him as a Kansas City Chiefs fan for patrolling the sidelines. And that was the first thing that popped into my head was Frank Gans, head coach, Kansas City Chiefs.
Exactly. And, of course, he struggled as a Chiefs coach, but, again, his specialty was special teams. The other game in the FBS, the Colorado and Wyoming. All right, we're recording now.
All right.
Oh, you all of a sudden got way overmodulated.
Sorry.
All right.
I'll keep talking and see if it lessens any.
Yeah, how'd that happen?
I don't know. Maybe the record was what triggered.
Better. Now you're better.
All right.
All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. John Wilkerson here. John Nelson hasn't gone anywhere. He's still with me. And
check.
Good stuff with Lehigh and Lafayette.
That was fun. And to be able to catch up with Matt and Mike, I always remember growing up, Dave Dials, when you and I were of a certain age, and Dave Dials would always be in charge of the college football scoreboard when ABC did college football. And I distinctly remember Dave Dials discussing Lehigh and Lafayette as a part of what he would do at this time of the season. So it was fun to be able to understand that you have two schools about a half hour apart that don't like each other, and that's kind of what the show's all about. It was a fun debrief with the two of them.
And that rivalry goes before the formation of college football. I mean, it's the 150th year of college football. It's the 155th meeting between Lehigh and Lafayette.
And, when you're looking at those kinds of rivalries, I know this is what you were thinking of when we, put the show together. So when you have this kind of information that we get to share with folks on a weekly basis, for me, it's fun. And it's been part of the cool factor of doing this show. And the response from the schools has been fantastic when it comes to being able to share what's going on and let everybody know what's going on in the world of college football that they may not necessarily have known about. And honestly, I've gotten so much feedback from our Monon Bell segment from last week's show that it was really cool. And I actually went back and watched the end of that particular game to kind of see what we're missing. And it appears that the DePaul coach is going to be retiring as well. So college classmate of Gil Tyree. So that's your piece of trivia for the show.
Good stuff right there. Okay. We talked with Cory McCartney from fansided.com about, first of all, the big game in the Bay Area between Cal and Stanford, and relived the 1982 ending. Joe Starkey's famous call. And that's kind of two mediocre Bay Area teams just trying to get bowl eligible.
Right. And right now it's a 3, according to Vegas, as you and I are talking. So basically Vegas thinks the same thing. It's a push.
And UCLA, USC at the Coliseum, the Battle of LA, who gets to ring the victory bell. And that's always one of my favorite rivalries, USC, UCLA. Of course, USC is a much stronger team right now, and they still have a shot at the Pac-12 West.
You look at the numbers as we're looking at them right now. USC is a 6-point favorite. Your money line's at -110. And actually, the line started double digits, but it has absolutely plummeted since. Started out at 13.5 and 14, down to a 6 right now.
So there's other rivalries in the FBS and the FCS, and one that's really big right now is the SMU Navy game at the Naval Academy this Saturday. They play for the Gans Trophy. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but both schools are in a 3-way tie in the American West. Memphis, SMU, and Navy all at 5-1 in conference. So this game is huge because the winner of this game is in the driver's seat for a West title in the American.
And as you and I are talking, Navy is listed as a 4-point favorite. The line hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. Money line started at 110, and that's pretty much where it's parked. So this one's been a pretty stagnant -4 for Navy, and the money line around 110 to 115.
And, of course, the prize is the Gans Trophy. This is in honor of Frank Gans, who was a special teams coach guru in the NFL. In fact, for a while, he was the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. But he played at Navy, and he coached at SMU. And a few years back, they made a traveling trophy to honor Frank Gans and his contributions to both schools. But you and I remember him as a special teams guru in the NFL way back in the day.
And you remember him as a Kansas City Chiefs fan for patrolling the sidelines. And that was the first thing that popped into my head was Frank Gans, head coach, Kansas City Chiefs.
Exactly. And, of course, he struggled as a Chiefs coach, but, again, his specialty was special teams. The other game in the FBS, the Colorado State and Wyoming, and this is for the bronze boot. And this is a really cool one because the ROTC detachments of both schools do the bronze boot. They meet at US 287 on the Colorado-Wyoming border, and they exchange the boot, and it's really a cool thing.
And as I'm feverishly trying to find a number when it comes to this particular game, I think honestly, when you're looking at Colorado State, you're really wondering about the future of their head coach and how much longer Mike Bobo has in Fort Collins, because there were expectations, and were very high expectations when he was brought in. And obviously, they're not being met probably to the liking of the folks in Fort Collins. And so I think that's probably your larger question. Right now, Wyoming is a 7-point favorite and the money line is about 105. The line hasn't budged a whole heck of a lot. Started out at 6.5. Money line anywhere from 102 to 118, depending on who you're talking to. So Wyoming listed right now as a 7-point favorite.
Colorado State's 4-6 on the year. They have to win out to stay in the bowl hunt. Wyoming 6-4, so they're positioning themselves for a bowl game, one of the Mountain West bowl stops in this one. So Colorado State, Wyoming for the bronze boot. Now let's move on to FCS. Harvard, Yale. I mean, is that epitome of college football?
Yeah, and that's the cool. That's, and I remember growing up. And do you remember when PBS National ran the Ivy League Game of the Week?
Yes.
Marty Glickman ran play-by-play on that. And so these were the kind of things that you'd see either on ABC, you'd have the live look-ins, or you'd have PBS doing it with Harvard and Yale. So for me, that's the fun part about all this kind of stuff. The game, capital T, capital G. Don't mess around with that title or the capitalization. So last week, when you have or 2 weeks ago, when you have Princeton playing games against Dartmouth at Yankee Stadium, that's a part of the coolness factor of stuff in the Northeast. But you got Harvard and Yale this week, so that one's another one for the Ivy League this go around in FCS.
Of course, Harvard won last year, ending a 2-game winning streak by Yale. Harvard's really dominated this rivalry since the turn of the 21st century. Basically, Yale's only won 4 games since. So this has really been one-sided toward the Crimson.
And looking at Harvard and Yale, right now Yale is a touchdown favorite. Your money line at -120. Your total is 54.5. And if you're looking at the money line, Yale is -290, Harvard +210.
Moving on to the Missouri Valley Conference, football conference, and it's the South Dakota Showdown Series.
Say that 10 times fast, sir.
Yes. South Dakota State and South Dakota meet at the Dakota Dome in Vermillion. And South Dakota has not won in this series since 2000. Now, it's a little deceptive because from 2004 to 2011, the two teams didn't play because South Dakota State went Division I. They renewed the series in 2012. It's been dominated by the Jackrabbits since, and they're 5th ranked, by the way, and they're probably going to get a top 8 seed in the FCS playoffs. But it's a rivalry game, and the Coyotes are going to be up for it.
South Dakota State right now, 13-point favorite. Your total is 61.5. Your money line at -120, -530 if you're looking at the Jacks here. South Dakota is +350 on the money line.
And moving on, the FCS in the Colonial Athletic Association, they call it the Empire Clash, but they play for an apple. It's Albany and Stony Brook. And the Great Danes and the Seawolves will get it on this Saturday for the Battle of the Apple, or the Battle for the Apple.
Battle for the Apple. And the Danes right now are only a 1.5 favorite. And your money line for Albany's at -135. Stony Brook is a 1.5 dog. And the money line for them, -105. So when you're looking at some things right now, obviously they're looking at this one being a close one. Could go either way.
Albany is 7-4 on the year, in second place in the CAA, 2 games behind James Madison. Stony Brook on the year 5-6, 2-5 in conference. So Albany probably really needs to get this win if they want to get any kind of consideration for the FCS playoffs.
And I'm right there with you, and I think Albany will pull it out. I think that the tightness that is shown by the folks who are our purveyors are reinforced by what we're seeing right now with the 1.5 difference.
So as always, good stuff, John.
That's always fun. Like I said, this was being able to get a sheet on a Sunday from an individual in particular, and he has a list of games. And the fun part of all of this is the treasure hunt and being able to have an education, not just for everybody who listens, but for ourselves, because, we'll hear one thing or the other one way, and then all of a sudden you end up with 2 great stories or a handful of stories every single week. And it was, once again, good to catch up about Lafayette and Lehigh, good to catch up with Cory McCartney and get the educations about everything that's going to happen, not just in the FBS, but in places that you didn't necessarily think.
And of course, next week it's kind of like Christmas Day for us, even though it's Thanksgiving weekend, because all the huge rivalries will be played in the FBS level next week. And we'll run down many of those next week on our Rivalries and Trophy Game show, John.
What you said. I second that motion, sir, and I'm right there with you. And the treasure hunt will continue for another go-around next week.
So we want to thank Matt Markus for joining us, as well as Mike Joseph, Cory McCartney, and for joining us here on the College Football Rivalries and Trophy Game show. So for John Nelson, I'm John Wilkerson. Enjoy the games this weekend.
You can find this and past shows by downloading the OSG Sports app on your mobile device. Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.